Florida, the Sunshine State with beautiful beaches, no state income tax, and warm weather all year round. Sounds like a dream, right? Well, for homebuyers in 2026, that dream is turning into a money nightmare. Here's what nobody's telling you. In some Florida cities, home prices are falling by as much as 10% as more homes for sale meet fewer people wanting to buy. But falling prices aren't always a good deal. They're often a warning sign. Then there's the big problem, insurance. The average homeowner's insurance cost in Florida is now over $6,000 a year, about 4 times higher than the rest of America. In some coastal areas, it's more than $10,000. That's not a mistake. You could easily pay more to protect your home than some people pay in rent. The U.S. Senate Budget Committee has warned that Florida could face a housing crash worse than 2008. So before you lock yourself into a 30-year mortgage in the Sunshine State, you need to know which cities to avoid. These are the 10 worst cities to buy a home in Florida in 2026, and trust me, buyers beware. Coming in at number 10, we have Cape Coral. And if you've been following real estate news, this shouldn't surprise you. The Wall Street Journal recently named Cape Coral the worst housing market in America. That's not one of the worst, it's the worst. So what's going on? Nearly 8% of homeowners in Cape Coral are underwater, meaning they owe more money on their home loans than their homes are actually worth. That's more than anywhere else in the country. Home prices dropped around 7 to 8% compared to last year, with homes sitting empty for an average of 84 days. On paper, it looks bad. In reality, it gets worse. More than half of the homes have had price cuts. Sellers are lowering prices just to get anyone interested. Cape Coral now has one of the highest foreclosure rates of any large metro in America. Sound familiar? It should. This is very similar to what started the 2008 housing crash. Now let's talk about the insurance problem. Cape Coral sits right on the Gulf Coast, and almost 90% of the city is exposed to storm surge in a worst-case hurricane scenario. That's nearly the entire city at risk. And if you're thinking you can just skip flood insurance, think again. Without it, water damage could destroy you financially. Dr. Selma Hepp, chief economist at CoreLogic, warns about serious housing market problems and points to Cape Coral's 6.5% price drop, while the rest of the nation is growing. Bottom line, Cape Coral was ground zero for the 2008 crash, and history might be repeating itself. Next, we have Lakeland, and this one might surprise some people. It's located between Tampa and Orlando, so you'd think it would do well. But the data tells a different story. According to CoreLogic, Lakeland is the second most risky housing market ready to crash in Florida. Real estate experts have marked Lakeland Winter Haven as being at very high risk of a downturn, with prices possibly dropping by double digits. The price trend for Lakeland shows a steady climb that peaked around early 2024, just below $400,000. Since then, it's been falling into 2025. What's driving this? Insurance costs in Florida have gone up by as much as 70% since 2020, making owning a home a heavy financial burden that's pushing away buyers. Here's what most buyers don't know about Lakeland. It's sitting in a dangerous area. Sinkholes are extremely common in Lakeland and throughout Central Florida, known as Sinkhole Alley. They cause huge amounts of property damage. Polk County, where Lakeland is located, is a hot spot for sinkholes. Many of the lakes in Polk County are actually old sinkholes, filled with water that could drain overnight. In 2022, Hurricane Ian brought wind speeds up to 78 miles per hour and cut power for nearly 63,500 customers, about half the city for days. The storm knocked down over 500 power lines. Between crashing home values, sinkholes that can swallow your house overnight, and hurricane danger, Lakeland is a risk most buyers shouldn't take. Next city in our list, Port St. Lucie, grew too fast, and now the problems are starting to show literally. It is a city that exploded during the pandemic as buyers ran from expensive cities looking for affordable Florida living, but that dream is starting to fall apart. Earlier forecasts warned that Port St. Lucie could see more price declines in 2025 based on a home price forecast score of just 36 out of 100, well below the stable market level of 45. While more recent data show a more stable market, the risk signs are still there. Fewer buyers than during the boom, longer waits to sell, and more price cuts than in a normal market. This is where things get worse. The city grew too fast. The city's population has grown to over 240,000 people, but the drainage system hasn't kept up. Recent storms left the entire city flooded, with roads staying underwater for nearly 24 hours. Residents are asking, if roads are flooding now, what happens when the next hurricane hits? Home insurance in Port St. Lucie costs around $3,900 per year, far above the national average, and still painful on top of mortgage, taxes, and flood insurance. The city gets over 50 inches of rain every year and floods easily. Dozens of canals and wetlands around the city mean many homes were built in flood areas. And if you're thinking the water quality is fine, think again. The city has been trying to connect homes to proper sewer systems for more than 25 years. About 11,100 are connected, but just as many old septic tanks are still in use. Those old systems, they're polluting groundwater and damaging the St. Lucie River. The county floods from heavy rain, tropical storms, hurricanes, and storm surge. Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Dorian, Hurricane Ian, and Hurricane Nicole have all caused flooding in recent years. Port St. Lucie was supposed to be the cheaper alternative to Miami, but between crashing home values, flooding streets, and old infrastructure, you might be buying someone else's problem. Next city, Ocala, is known as the horse capital of the world, but right now, this market looks like trouble. The number of home sales in Ocala dropped by more than 15% in May compared to a year ago. That's not a small dip, that's a market hitting the brakes hard. Homes in Ocala now sit empty for an average of 73 days before selling, compared to just 37 days last year. That's double the time. And when homes sit that long, desperate price cuts follow. What makes Ocala particularly risky is something most buyers never think about. Florida has more sinkholes than any other state, and northern and central Florida are hot spots. The soft limestone rock under the ground in Ocala has holes in it. Water makes these holes bigger over time. Eventually, the ground above can collapse and cause a sinkhole. In 2018, 12 sinkholes opened up in one Ocala neighborhood at the same time. More recently, in 2023, heavy rains caused a large sinkhole in a residential area. Now, here's the part almost nobody talks about. Most homeowner insurance doesn't cover sinkhole damage. Insurance companies call it earth movement and won't pay for it because it's so expensive to fix. You need to buy separate, expensive sinkhole insurance, and many companies can refuse to sell it to you if you're near a known sinkhole. The bottom line? Ocala might look cheap on paper, but between falling sales, sinkhole risk, and projections for far more extremely hot days in the coming decades, you could buy a property that literally falls into the earth and your insurance won't cover it. Next city, Fort Lauderdale looks like paradise on the surface, but underneath, there's a storm coming, literally. Beautiful beaches, world-class boating, exciting nightlife. But the reality is very different. Real estate analyst Nick Gurley warned that Fort Lauderdale's huge rise in available homes is a troubling sign for future home prices in South Florida. There are now 9.84 months of housing supply in Broward County, the highest level since the 2007-12 crash ended. This situation today in South Florida feels very similar to 2006-07. Back then, homes for sale had spiked, but prices hadn't really dropped yet, Gurley said. If that comparison doesn't scare you, you weren't around for 2008. The Fort Lauderdale housing market is expected to fall further in 2025 to 2026, with a home price forecast score of just 32 out of 100, showing it's clearly a buyer's market. But the housing numbers are just the beginning. The Miami-Fort Lauderdale-West Palm Beach area leads the nation in total property value at risk of serious flood and wind damage. A home worth $614,000 could face insurance costs of $22,718 per year. That's not a mistake, over $22,000 a year just for insurance. Most residents of Fort Lauderdale live less than 5 feet above sea level and will face more and more tidal flooding. In April 2023, a rain bomb stopped over Fort Lauderdale, dropping over 25 inches of rain in 24 hours. Streets turned into rivers, cars went underwater, and this isn't old history, it's the new normal. Nearly all buildings in Fort Lauderdale are at risk of flooding. Then there's the condo problem. New laws requiring more inspections of old condos and requiring money saved for repairs have caused an explosion of listings, with condo owners trying to sell properties that few want to buy. The typical condo price fell nearly 10% year over year, and many owners face huge bills just to keep their buildings standing. Fort Lauderdale isn't just dealing with a housing correction, it's facing climate change, a condo crisis, and insurance costs that could ruin the average homeowner. This is not the time to buy. At number 5. Fort Myers. 3 years after Hurricane Ian, Fort Myers is still recovering, and the real pain might just be starting. Jackhammers still echo along Fort Myers Beach after the storm made landfall with 155 miles per hour winds and a 15-foot wall of water. Empty lots sit next to destroyed buildings. New construction rises beside the shells of what used to be family businesses. And if you're thinking of buying here, you should know, the area isn't close to being fixed. Fort Myers sits in Lee County, which has seen some of the biggest home value declines in Florida, with double-digit drops since the 2022 peak. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that home prices in the Cape Coral-Fort Myers area fell by 11% over 2 years, the biggest drop of any metro area in America. This isn't normal. It's the result of a $113 billion disaster that changed who can afford to live here. Here's the hidden problem. Local real estate agents warn that many foreclosures could be coming. Many homeowners are struggling just to make their monthly payments. Insurance quotes more than doubled after Ian, and the people who used to work in hotels and tourism, the backbone of this economy, can't afford to live here anymore. The town's character is disappearing. Fort Myers Beach used to have family-owned businesses, local restaurants, small hotels, and mom-and-pop shops. Hurricane Ian didn't just destroy buildings, it sped up neighborhood change that was already happening. Rebuilding a small 5-room hotel now costs over $4 million. The numbers don't work for small business owners. Meanwhile, 99% of Fort Myers properties face extreme heat risk over the next 30 years. Summers will feel like living in an oven for weeks. The city remains open to future hurricanes, and each storm season brings new worry. Major employers like South Seas Resort on Captiva, which once had 400 jobs, are slowly rebuilding, but it will take years before the local economy gets better. For now, Fort Myers shows what happens. Even recovered hurricane areas can take a decade to truly bounce back. At number 4, Jacksonville is Florida's largest city by land area, but all that space comes with a hidden weakness that's catching up with it. The city takes pride in spreading across 840 square miles. But all that space comes with a hidden problem. Over 1,000 miles of waterfront along rivers, creeks, and ocean that bring flood risk deep into inland neighborhoods you wouldn't expect. Recent data tells the story. Jacksonville just saw the biggest home price drop among the nation's 40 largest cities, typical prices dropping over $16,000 year over year. Available homes have jumped from 2,000 in 2022 to over 12,000 today. One local real estate expert said it clearly. There are now 5 times more sellers than buyers. But the bigger issue isn't today's market correction, it's what's coming. The street. Johns River, which runs through downtown Jacksonville, has seen measurable sea level rise that is speeding up. Here's the scary part. The river bottom sits below sea level for 150 miles inland, meaning rising seas aren't just a coastal problem here. Climate experts think that within 30 years, what Hurricane Irma did in 2017, causing historic flooding from just a Category 1 storm, could happen much more frequently. The city's infrastructure shows years of delayed repairs. Jacksonville has struggled for decades with thousands of broken septic tanks that leak pollution into waterways. The cleanup cost is estimated at $2 billion or more, and while the city has spent over $207 million, only a few neighborhoods have been fixed. Dozens of important buildings, hospitals, schools, police, and fire stations face flooding by 2050 under medium sea level rise scenarios. The city currently only sees a handful of extreme high tide days per year, but projections show that by mid-century, that number could jump dramatically, turning what used to be rare flooding into a regular problem. Foreclosure rates are climbing, too. Jacksonville recently ranked among the worst big cities, with about 1 in every 1,576 homes facing foreclosure. For a city that handled hurricanes better than Southwest Florida, Jacksonville's housing troubles come from something harder to escape, a location that puts it directly in climate change's path. At number 3, Pensacola markets itself as having great weather. What they don't mention is that this Gulf Coast city sits directly in Hurricane Alley. The city promotes beautiful beaches, historic charm, and living costs below the national average. What the tourist information doesn't mention is the terrible hurricane track record to prove it. The numbers first. Home values have dropped 3.6% year over year, with the home price forecast score dropping to just 33 out of 100 deep into falling market territory. Nearly 30% of listings have had price cuts, and the market that once had bidding wars now has identical homes with very different results. One sells in days, while another sits for months. But Pensacola's real problem is its brutal hurricane history. Hurricane Ivan in 2004 caused $13 billion in damage, destroying over 6,000 homes in Escambia County alone. Nearly every building at the Naval Air Station, which employs 16,000 military and 7,400 civilian workers, was heavily damaged. Then came Hurricane Sally in 2020, dumping over 2 feet of rain and flooding 433 of the base's 500 buildings. FEMA just updated the city's flood maps in August 2025, and many properties that weren't in flood zones before are now. That means required flood insurance for anyone with a home loan, an extra $800 to $900 per year, on top of already expensive homeowners insurance. The location is harsh. Pensacola is surrounded by water on 3 sides, has many low areas, and gets heavy rainfall. Even properties outside official flood zones aren't safe. Nearly 20% of flood insurance claims nationally come from areas thought to be at lower risk. Over 13,000 Escambia County residents already have flood insurance. The unstable market conditions show deeper uncertainty. Buyers and sellers are both careful, worried about insurance availability, hurricane risk, and economic problems. As one local agent said, all bets are off. For military families stationed at NAS Pensacola, there's little choice. For everyone else, the question is whether coastal Florida living is worth the repeated gamble. Coming to number 2, Miami Beach is flooding on sunny days, and it's only going to get worse. There's something happening in Miami Beach called sunny day flooding, water rising up through storm drains and flooding streets when there's not a cloud in the sky. It happens now 3 to 7 days per year, but scientists think that by 2030, Miami Beach could see around 45 to 50 days of sunny day flooding per year. By 2050, experts warn that what Hurricane Irma did could happen almost every year. This isn't a future problem. It's happening now. Sea levels at the southern end of Florida have risen a foot since the 1900s, nearly 5 inches since 1993 alone. The ocean takes back chunks of land during fall and spring king tides, which happen 4 times more often than just 15 years ago. The soft rock underground beneath Miami Beach means there's no stopping the Atlantic Ocean seawater pushes up through the soil itself. The city has spent over $400 million installing pumps and raising streets, but here's the hard truth. They're buying time, not solving the problem. The city manager himself described their plan as, "How do we stay relatively dry for the next 30 to 50 years? That's not confidence, that's slowly giving up." Now add the condo problem. After the Champlain Towers South collapse killed 98 people in 2021, Florida required building inspections and fully funded repair money for buildings over 30 years old. The result? In many older high-rise buildings, HOA fees have jumped into the $1,500 to $2,000 plus range, with some owners paying over $3,000 a month after new safety rules kicked in. Some unit owners face special bills of over $100,000. Nearly 900,000 Florida condo units are in buildings that must follow these rules, and many owners are being forced to sell or face foreclosure. The condo market has 14 months of available homes, a deep buyer's market territory. Typical condo prices in Broward County have dropped below $250,000. Only 21 of South Florida's 2,397 condo buildings are approved for FHA loans. Meanwhile, a recent UBS report ranks Miami as the city with the highest housing bubble risk in the world. The typical household income here supports a mortgage of around $300,000, well below the typical single-family home price. The math doesn't work. And when federal flood insurance help eventually ends, experts warn the region faces serious pain. At number 1, Punta Gorda has one of the steepest home price declines in Florida and the entire country. Condo prices have dropped even more, and homes now sit empty for an average of 162 days, selling for 7% below the asking price. In 2004, Hurricane Charlie made a surprise last-minute turn and hit Punta Gorda as a Category 4 storm with 145-mile-per-hour winds. Nearly 11,000 homes were destroyed. The historic courthouse, Charlotte High School, and all 4 local hospitals damaged or destroyed. More than 5,000 mobile homes simply disappeared. Locals still talk about time as before Charlie and after Charlie. The town rebuilt. Then, Hurricane Ian arrived in 2022 as the third costliest hurricane in U.S. history. Thousands more homes were damaged. Insurance costs jumped. And this time, the recovery stopped. What makes Punta Gorda's situation especially painful is who lives there. Charlotte County has one of the highest numbers of elderly residents in Florida, retirees who moved here for affordable waterfront living. Now they're stuck in homes worth less than they paid, facing insurance costs they can't afford, watching their life savings disappear. The weather outlook offers no comfort. Every single property in Punta Gorda faces extreme heat risk. Summers will feel unbearable for weeks. Hurricane danger remains high. And unlike richer coastal communities that can afford protection investments, Punta Gorda doesn't have the money. For example, one waterfront home bought for just under $1 million in 2022 later had its asking price cut multiple times, and bank valuation models now suggest it's worth far less than even the reduced price. That's not a correction, that's a collapse. For a retirement community built on the promise of sunny skies and affordable living, the dream has become a money nightmare. If Cape Coral and Fort Myers are warning sirens, Punta Gorda is what happens when you ignore them. Look, Florida isn't all bad. Millions of people live here happily. But if you're thinking about buying in any of these 10 cities, go in with your eyes open. Think about the real cost of insurance. Understand your flood zone. Research the HOA's money situation. And ask yourself honestly, can I afford to stay if another hurricane hits, if insurance costs double again, if my home loses value? The sunshine is real, but so are the risks. Do your research before you sign anything.